Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Hello, welcome to another podcast of Harvesting Wisdom. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. Today with me is Allie Schuessler.
Yeah.
Close enough?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. I don't think I've ever gotten one name right since I've started, but Allie, welcome to the show. Allie, you are a scientist over at Desert Botanical Society or Museum. What is that?
Garden.
Garden.
Desert Botanical Garden.
Got it.
Yeah.
So thanks for being here. And what I'd like to start with is just telling me, what's your background? What motivated you, inspired you to be where you are today?
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is.
So I am originally from Northern California, and I grew up in the woods.
Oh.
Barefoot in the woods, running around. My mother may have had to call poison control for me eating random things in the woods, so always a nature child.
Wow, that's great. I want to go back right now.
I know, it's so funny.
That
like
sounds
my
great.
poor mother.
So you had all kinds of different mushrooms.
Oh my God, all kinds of different mushrooms out there. And so maybe the love for fungus, which maybe we'll talk about later, started early.
Yeah, great.
But always have loved being outside and loved plants. And then I ended up being at Northern Arizona University for both my bachelor's and my master's, where I but I was lucky enough to be a part of Catherine Gehring's lab group, where
Okay.
she studies plant-fungal interactions and their roots.
Phenomenal.
And I was blown away. I had no idea that the natural world could be that amazing and inspiring. And so after that, my current boss he was on my committee at the time, and he was like, "You've got to come down to the botanical garden. Got to interview for this position. Like, see what you can do." I was like, "All right, like, I don't know about Phoenix. Like, it's pretty hot down there.
It is.
There's no trees."
Well, there's trees here.
Well, I came to find
Okay.
out, I was like a little forest kid.
Yeah.
And,
Now you're in the desert.
Now I'm in the desert.
Different place.
And so there I was, and I was like, okay, gonna go down there for a little bit and see how this goes. And then I'll make a move if I need to. And in the first couple months, I just fell absolutely in love with the Sonoran Desert, as I
Wow.
think so
And
many
what
of
a
us
great
do.
place to learn how to do that, the Desert Botanical Garden.
Yeah. Have you been?
We did, I think my landscape company landscaped the parking lots years and years ago. And I was just saying to Drew in a podcast that when I was a graduate student at ASU, I think I did some of the mapping for the early, like where the things will lay out. They were still already in business, but, so we had some interaction there. But yeah, I do. I don't get there as often as I need to. As a matter of fact, we just rode the light rail all the way from its new endpoint at Metro Center to the Mixed Theater, ASU's Mixed Theater
Really? How
in
was
Mesa.
that?
Well, it's great because we have this environmental film festival coming up, and we have points. Everything that we're doing is along the light rail. So I
how
kind of
cool.
rediscovered Phoenix, Tempe, Mesa, and I'm like, wow, look, the bar scene, I immediately go to that, is really cool in all three cities.
Yeah, it is.
And then I forgot about the Heard Museum. I haven't been there forever. We got the
Yes.
library. We're not on, that light rail's not on the zoo or the botanical pathway yet.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it would because we don't want to rip
Yeah,
a
that's
line
on
through the
Washington,
desert.
and
Yeah,
yeah.
not too far, but these
Yeah.
are, and so my message was, if you're coming from out of town, you can fly to the airport, take the light rail to the Valley Metro, and everything you do can be along. You don't have to rent a car. So we think of Phoenix as, oh, you need a car.
Right.
No, you don't. You can go to great hotels, great restaurants, great bars, shopping, everything.
Yep.
And then the other message was to people who live here, we all spread out all over. I'm from Buffalo originally, so in New York, which isn't a huge dense city, but the whole East Coast is considerably more dense.
Yeah.
Coming here and seeing everything so spread out, I like all these cities now. They first of all, the way they made it was they brought education back into the core of the city.
Hmm.
So we got youth back in, so you got some life breathing into the cities. But the cities now have really changed and become like the place that you want to be. So my message on that podcast was, look, you've been out in Scottsdale, you've been out in Tonopah, or wherever you are, and you
Yeah.
think you're
Yeah.
no, 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 come into town. You don't have to
Yeah.
go on a vacation. Come in and look at all we have. And I would say the
That is so
Desert
cool.
Botanical
Garden.
Garden is, I'll never get that right,
Okay.
is like another amazing place. You can spend a whole day in there. And
Oh,
the zoo,
easily.
I don't know if you can do both in the day.
I
There's
don't know
just
if
so
you
much
can
to do.
either. Our zoo is also
Yeah.
incredible. They do a lot of restoration work too, and they work with native species from all over the state.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. What is your work at the garden?
What
Let's
is
just
my
go with
work
that.
at the garden? Well, my role is I manage two of the laboratories there. So I manage the plant physiology lab and then also the molecular lab.
Okay.
But I also have the privilege to do some independent research, and that has largely been on saguaros lately. And
Mm.
it, stemmed from just a love for saguaros and the icon that they are out in the desert.
Are you seeing what I'm seeing that I've never seen in 40 some plus years here in the last couple of years?
Yes.
I've never seen a saguaro blow up before.
Yes, it
You
is
know.
something that is new. It's very concerning. And we have had so many people from the public reach out in emails and it's been pretty incredible to see how much everybody loves our plants. I
Right.
mean, they are one of the defining features of the Southwest, and they go all the way from Kingman. So not many people know this. Their furthest north is Kingman, Arizona, and then they go all the way down into Navajoa, Sonora, and that's the furthest south they go.
Yeah.
So they have a really large range. They can exist in a pretty wide range of temperatures, and they're just truly lovely. But you don't
Yeah.
want to hug them like a tree.
No, with my landscape company, we started in salvage. I worked for a company years and years ago that's not in business, but they were kind of the pioneers of digging trees and cacti. So
Okay.
we've done more cacti and trees and plants salvage and replant than any other company. And I've done it all over the state.
Mm.
We've even done it in California. And so soils are like my thing because you have to understand, this is a blow sand or this has got a little clay in it or caliche, what's creating it, what's the
Right.
compaction, how is it all going? And so by digging these things, but you also start paying attention. I'd go to big projects, anthems or Sun Cities or, you know, every major subdivision project in the valley. We did the salvage on the 101, the 202, the 303. So when we're
Wow.
doing it, I start looking and seeing patterns, not
Mm-hmm.
because I was curious. I hate to say it. Strictly, it was a commercial enterprise, right?
Right. Right.
But I'm there and I'm starting to pay attention to bosques of ocotillos or
Right.
groupings of big trees, and you see like ironwoods and saguaros growing together in little areas. And so when we start with a developer, we'll start by identifying and mapping everything at first.
Mm.
And when I was doing Desert Ridge Golf Course, I had Arnold Palmer standing in the back of my pickup truck, and we were designing. I was designing the landscape. He was designing the golf, and we drove. I think it was the fifth hole. There's a dog leg right, and at the end of it, there was this huge, 3 or 4 monstrous ironwoods. They must have been 300 to 500 years old,
Oh my
and
God.
huge saguaros in there. And I
Yep.
think there was even a crested saguaro in there. And he's like, Mike, I'd like to push this back. And I was like, you're not going to do that, Arnold. And it's the first time we'd met, and I was like, all that plant material is like 10 times your age, and you're an old guy.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and I said, we're not moving that, so move your golf. And he looked at me and well, he was a great guy, a gentleman, and he goes, I'll tell you what, Mike, you deal with the landscape and I'll deal with the golf. We got a deal? And I was like, we
Easy.
got it made.
Easy.
You know,
There you
so
go.
that was the idea is that the best thing in a landscape is just design around the good stuff if you can,
Oh,
but
of
you're also
course.
seeing how water works. And so, from my standpoint, saguaros only grow when they're covered with a bush or a tree,
Mm,
and that's how they start growing until they're strong enough to handle it. But as
right.
we, when I was talking with Drew, we talk about segmenting natural areas, right, by cutting
Yes.
power lines and roads in.
Yep.
We don't understand what we're actually doing when we do that. When we dam up something, and now all of a sudden it's not getting the same water flow for that soil. There's
Right.
a lot of different things. And years ago, we started um, a soil company. So I had
Okay.
to actually learn about soils, and that's why I'm
And
curious
aren't they
about you.
amazing?
They are
Soils are one of my
amazing.
favorite
But
things.
I was, when I first started the business, we were just composting. I didn't know good compost from bad compost. And I didn't
Right.
know, I knew, chemically, you can do an analysis, and
Right.
physically I can see, okay, that looks pretty good. It's got some drainage or whatever. But I started taking, and I'm sure you know Elaine Ingram's soil food lab stuff. So I started looking at it from the biological side. So now everything we're doing, and we're changing my landscape company, which is 4 decades old, into a completely different approach of landscaping using a bio complete soils,
Hmm.
um, and whether it's turf areas or whether it's, so I have a whole protocol for native trees
Wow.
and so you have to decide whether that plant or that crop is either bacterial or fungal. And so we make our
Okay.
soils amendments based on that, and then our extracts, for the rhizosphere and the phyllosphere is the T's, have to do with, you know, helping those exudates grow the biology you need, and that's the difference. And so that's where the diseases and
You're
the
doing it
problems are.
all. This is incredible. I had no
Well,
idea
it's
that
not.
anybody was doing this.
Well,
I'm
it's
so
there's a
inspired
handful of
right
people
now.
around the
Yeah.
country that are
I'm
doing
really
it.
inspired.
Well, if you go to I don't know what we have. I haven't even reviewed all the films, but there's some documentaries that talk about regenerative farming,
Mm-hmm.
but most of them are really what I call regenerative cattle.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that in a podcast, and I was
Yeah.
like, we called that ranching, not farming. And
Right.
I got, a little bite from that. No, that's a form of agriculture. I'm
It's a
like, yeah, but
form
you're
of
not.
agriculture.
And they're
Yeah.
growing,
Yeah.
grasses for people, for the animals to eat, but it's different from trying to actually grow a better pistachio or a better avocado or,
It is.
row cropping grains or whatever. And it's
Right.
the same thing. So now there's landscape companies out that have arborists that come in and they're air spading and they're putting in for big trees and stuff. We've created some soils that are, if you think about it, more granite. So they
Right.
want it
Well
all
draining.
compost, and I'm like, no, you'll kill it.
Nope. You'll kill
So
it.
it's like
Yep.
70% granite, and then if it's an oak tree, it's a more fungal based. If it's, so this is
So
the
you've really
concept with how they're
done
doing it.
your research on fungi and bacteria and desert
Yeah,
ecosystems.
because I've done it all wrong.
And it sounds like it started
So,
very utilitarian and it's really turned into
yeah.
something that,
So what are you doing at the So I know
yeah.
saguaro, you're studying saguaros and stuff, but what are you doing you've got a lab where you're doing microscopy and you're doing, so what other
Well,
plants are you looking at?
I'm not doing microscopy at the moment.
Okay.
I do have some slides I'm waiting to look at, so pretty excited for that. But with the saguaros, my goal at the moment was to track health over the year and just to see at what point in time, which I think we can all guess, they become most stressed, what stresses them out, and how long they can withstand it.
Right.
So those are some of the things that I'm particularly interested in right now. And you pointed out some of the threats that are facing them. One of them is habitat loss. You have invasive species, which is tied to nurse plant loss and cattle grazing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the one that we haven't talked about yet is fire. And that's also heavily tied to invasive species. So you've got all these things that are threatening saguaros. Oh, and then we haven't even talked about the heat and the changes in the weather patterns.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you look out over the landscape at saguaro, you see that they have different sizes, right? And we call those cohorts. So you'll see that like maybe one year there was a bunch of them and they're all little itty bitty babies. And then there was this really long gap. And then a bunch of them were like tall spears with one arm or something.
Right,
And those
right.
were probably another regeneration year. And, you'll see a couple of these when you look over the landscape. So you'll have several different cohorts. And one of the main things that is going on right now is you're not having recruitment events. So for a baby saguaro to be successful, you have to have a very wet monsoon followed by a wet winter.
We
And
don't have that anymore.
we don't have that so much anymore.
Yeah.
And then, okay, you're a baby saguaro. Have you seen a baby saguaro?
We've moved millions of them.
Millions
We
of them?
call
Okay,
them
no.
pups. We
Like
call
the
them
the
pups.
tiny little guys that are
Yeah,
the size of your
yeah,
nail.
the little ones.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so for anybody who hasn't seen one, they're adorable. And you look at it and you're like, what is that thing? It is so vulnerable and they're tiny. It takes them 5-10 years to become,
Right.
just a little guy. And so they're very vulnerable for that first bit of their life. And having a nurse plant, as you brought up, is very helpful to them. So they can have that protection from the cold, protection from the heat, and an increased availability of water because there's more organic matter in that soil, like you were saying.
Yeah. So the tip for a landscaper would be plant that little saguaro. And how you water it matters too. If you water too much, you'll kill it
You'll
right
kill
away.
it.
But
Yeah.
plant it with like a creosote bush, a
A
young creosote
creosote.
bush, something that or a jojoba or something that's going to give it
Yes.
solid shade for a good 20, 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
Then it grows out, right?
And you kind of brought this up earlier as well. They love nitrogen fixers. So
Yeah.
we have a pretty depleted soil out here in the desert. It's hard for plants to get nitrogen and phosphorus. And so what a lot of our trees do is they are nitrogen fixing.
So a
And
mesquite is a legume basically, and it's a nitrogen fixer.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So you get your palo verdes, your mesquites, and that's what you often see
Yeah.
saguaros coming up under. They love nitrogen.
Yeah. So it's interesting, really, what you're talking about is the food web underground.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're talking about plants that evolve with birds and arthropods. And that evolution is severed when we bring in a non-native, right? An invasive species. So we
Yes.
call them weeds, but a weed is really the definition of a weed is just something you don't want there. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing.
It's a bad thing.
It's just maybe something you don't want in that landscape, right?
Right.
So with these invasive species and stuff, what are you seeing? Because I see it in the landscape. I cannot talk an architect into, look, let's just put in native mesquite, native palo verde. Instead, they want a hybrid Colorado mesquite or a Chilean or whatever. They're
Yeah.
faster growing, and I'm like, first of all, to
It's
me,
not.
they're incongruent. They're ugly,
Yep.
and they'll be like, no, they're pretty. No, they're not.
Yeah.
And then secondly, they just aren't evolved with whatever other insects or species that are meant to help them,
Right.
stay in the environment, right?
Well, and it sounds like you're talking about building bio islands in the city, which is, I think, exactly what we should be doing. By having native species, we bring in all the pollinators, you bring in the birds, you keep everybody that you want there
Butterflies
in
that
this
are in trouble.
repository,
Right.
right?
Bees,
And
yeah.
and we're seeing that kind of being lost on the landscape, which is very unfortunate, but it's something that I think we need to be very transparent about. Um, these habitat loss that we're seeing it's not a small thing.
No.
And
And it's so
yeah.
interesting because you talk about pollinators, whether they're bees or they're birds,
Hmm.
they could be
Bats.
butterflies, bats.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, we know that we spray, I'm not going to use the actual word, we spray herbicides
Right.
and pesticides. And what we're doing is killing all the biology when we do it, including these pollinators. So it should be
Hmm.
no surprise when we have a problem with a lot of the plants we're actually putting in and growing, right? And interesting, a couple of months ago, I went to Hawaii and I podcasted the Lahaina. You know Lahaina in Hawaii?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And that bottom line is it was a spark
Okay.
and a heavy wind and it torched.
Yes.
And what's crazy is you'd never think in a million years that you're going to get a wildfire along the ocean. You're
No,
like,
you
here's the
really
ocean
don't. Yep.
and the
Yep.
wildfire. It was a path and it wasn't even like a mile deep. It was maybe a half mile wide along the ocean, and it was like a blowtorch. Literally, it killed people, but it took out almost all the structures, a lot of the everything. And the main cause for it was invasive species.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because well, think Hawaii used to be the most
Okay.
biodiverse, one of the most in the world, and now it's lost a lot of that diversity, and it's got because anything will grow, so these invasive species grew. So it
Yep.
is interesting how everything we're talking about is it's simple, yet
Yes.
it's not something people pay attention to.
Well, and it's yeah, people look over the landscape and they're like, "Wow, it's so grassy and nice." And I want to pick on buffalo grass because,
Yeah.
it ties in pretty nicely with the cattle industry. You go down to parts of Sonora and you see people collecting buffalo grass seed on the sides of the road.
Uh-huh.
And it's so that they can spread it out so that the cattle have food.
Yeah.
And so this is something that cows love to eat, but cows are very damaging to our landscape. And you'll
Right.
see them just running out around the Sonoran Desert. Then they spread these buffalo grass seeds as they go. And buffalo grass is adapted to burn.
Yeah.
Saguaros are not adapted to burn. Um, they are columns of water. And
What's the other? Kudzu, that's another invasive species you see all over California.
yes,
That is
yes.
kind of, it looks beautiful until it kills its host.
Kills
Generally,
its
right?
host. Well, and then, okay, so you have this invasive species that's spreading fire, but you also have this below ground relationship. They're changing the chemicals in the soil, and it's called allelopathy. So you have these invasive species that come in and they start altering the soil. And even if you come in and remove them, there's something that's called a legacy effect. So that soil is altered until you do restoration on it, and it makes it harder for native species to come back.
Wow.
So it's not a small feat to be up against. And there's been some testing about how saguaros do in buffalo grass soils, and they don't
Do
like
well,
it.
yeah. Or
They don't
palo
like
verdes
it.
don't do well in any turf area,
Yes.
basically, right? The
Hmm.
mesquite can handle it, palo verdes can't, and saguaros or ironwood don't really like the salts so much from the overspray.
Right.
They can survive, but because they take so long to die. Um, but but really, the
Yeah.
mesquite I think is the only one that the mesquites are probably our number one um, foundation plant of trees, I would think,
Yeah.
and it's so it is pretty darn hardy. But
Yes, but
it's
even they are really taking a toll with these changes to the landscape. So it's um it's a large problem. And I think bringing it into the city as you're doing is a really interesting move because restoration work is incredibly hard. It's very expensive. And, I was out at a riparian site trying to do restoration during my master's. And oh my God, it was so hard. You watch those little plants die, even though you're watering them and you don't know what's going on and you're trying everything. And so it's incredibly difficult work. It can be expensive and it takes a lot of manpower too.
well, I think it takes it's a process, right? So we started doing salvage work,
Hmm.
and I had two competitors at the time. I think both of them are out of business, but we helped with the city of Scottsdale write their native plant ordinance,
Oh, how
which
cool.
then was
Okay.
adapted to Mesa and to Phoenix. It was cool, but it was cool for me because with an ordinance I could make more money. So it wasn't again this
Yeah.
philanthropic concept. I believed that the landscape in Phoenix should be all native. I
Hmm.
think we're now at a point where we've done some massive subdivisions, 10,000 plus acres,
Mm.
and the water authorities are coming saying you got to cut 25% of your water. And we're talking landscapes that are
Right.
hundreds of millions on these subdivisions. But they were using the wrong plants to begin with.
Yep.
And they knew it. They just didn't care. They didn't realize the consequence. And so a native landscape you can do, and you can still bring color in.
Oh, yeah.
You can do a little xeriscape. There's different things you can
Yep.
do in nodal areas and keep the majority of it native. And that's the concept. Restoration for me isn't that difficult. It's just that, when you get the one architect who says, yeah, we still want Chinese elms. It's like, well, you just screwed the whole thing up. You cannot
Yeah,
do it,
you
right?
can't just do that.
But again, it's
Right.
And we've done this too because we're in two of the big dairies, and we do 100,000 tons of composting a year,
Right.
and we do vermicomposting at a huge scale. We're in a big building bigger than this, and all we have is worms that are in there, right? So for me, the restoration's not that difficult a concept because we'll have compost. Some of our compost lines will go anaerobic. So when
Okay.
that happens, you have, bad biology growing, right? So
Right.
you have root feeding nematodes, and you have,
Yep.
you know,
You've got the
too
guys
much.
you don't want.
Right, you got the guys you don't want, but we can remediate a compost pile in about 2 weeks. It's not
So,
that difficult.
all right, I've got to ask
So
because
you're
I'm
using an
curious.
extract, yeah,
Yeah. So, do you ever use native soils to kind of
yeah.
help jumpstart your soils that you're using for
Depending
compost?
on your crop. So
Okay.
everything is, it sounds like it's complicated, but it's not. So everything is kind of crop specific.
Okay.
Your native plants, really, you could almost look at them as a single crop, although there's a difference, but they all like our soil. They like a granite, well drained soil. They like infrequent, deep watering. There's a few things they like. They're primarily bacterial.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're making your soils and your extracts that you deal with, when we go up that evolutionary chain to go back over to California, to the woods,
Right.
we're going fungal. And if you really think about it, it's that the reason being is that is true regenerative, right? Nobody's in there fertilizing the forest in California,
Right.
unless like in Oregon. You go to Oregon, and it's just beautiful, all these trees, it's gorgeous. 75% of Oregon is not native. It's not in, so it depends on what's growing. But if it's been left alone and not isolated, not cut off from water and things like that, for the most part, you've got more of a fungal base. So you want biodiversity, but when you're creating your extracts, you're creating extracts that'll help feed that particular crop. And so extracts are the cheapest things that you can put down because you're taking to put compost down. We're at one farm. We've got 100 acres is 23 truckloads of compost.
Hmm.
That's a lot of compost.
Right.
But the farm that we're working on is 400 acres, right? So think about that. That would be almost 100 truckloads of compost. One less than one truckload of extract, which is a dry product we make, similar to the compost, but it's more designed. That will do all 400 acres, 3 drenches.
Hmm.
So we're adding that much more biology to the compost is adding the carbon, but we're adding that biology and then you can do the same amount with in the phylosphere spraying the tree, working with
Right.
those exudates. So that's the
So I think,
concept that we have.
well, there's one thing that I'm not sure I quite agree with you with. I
Okay,
think
I
that,
saw that look.
yeah, I think the
You're
desert,
wrong.
yeah,
Okay.
I think the the plants here in the desert have quite a few fungal associations.
Okay.
Something that has been shocking to me working with fungi in the desert is that there is not a lot of work that's been done on it. And this is largely because it is very difficult to dig up plant roots in the desert because it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
It's very rocky. And the roots are typically very like brittle and dry. And so they kind of break apart when you're pulling them up.
Right.
So it's difficult work to do, first of all. But we do know that saguaro form fungal associations. We know that a lot of our
Of course,
trees.
everything has some fungal in it,
Yes,
right?
it forms fungal associations. And then with building up a soil for these plants, they really like their native guys. And so it's really important, I think, to start with a very healthy soil from the desert so that they have their associates that they always form
Sure.
bonds with. They're going to be more successful if they have their native guys to form associations
And there's so
with.
many microclimates.
Yes.
There's so many. So just from a standpoint, I think of the jobs I've built, or I didn't say built, I said build,
Yeah.
which was like Troon or Fountain Hills or any of the desert mountain places we've worked. I know the plants that are there, they're yes, they're all very similar, but they're different. You can get crucifixion thorn up in that area,
Hmm.
which you don't get anywhere else. You can
Right.
get jojoba in certain areas, lowland. So it depends on the water, and it depends on your elevation, and it
Right.
does depend on how that soil's been formed and whether it's compacted or not. And so that's That's the deal. And so when we put plant material back in, that's the revegetation process. It's all brand new soil, really. It's been scraped. It's been maybe it's a cut of 20 feet or a fill of 20 feet. So it's not there's not a lot of biology to it. The
Right.
good thing with native soils and native plants is you don't need super sophisticated biology. However, if you do have it, you're going to have a much better looking, uh, area.
Right. Well, and your plants can likely be quite a bit more fortified,
Right.
right? So fungi do more than just collecting nutrients and water for the
Well, they're
plant.
transmitting, they're communicating. Yeah, they're doing everything
They're
right.
communicating, and then they can also help form hormones for the plant that can help with heat stress
Right.
and can help with stomatal regulation.
It's
So
also
there's a lot of function that these guys can
the
have.
fungi is actually how we sequester that carbon too.
It's,
So it'll
yeah,
be
one of the
30% of it,
ways
right? But you don't do that with bacteria. Bacteria, there's 100,000 in the pinpoint
of soil.
of whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
but the fungal has that ability to do it, and it is interesting also to see. I don't live in Tucson, but we have projects there, and we have, but to me, Tucson is like way prettier than Phoenix. You know, it just is, and it's
Yeah.
because you get some of that water. I
Right.
did,
The diversity down there is pretty
yeah,
incredible.
years
Yeah.
ago, I did a
Yeah.
started on a golf course in um, Green Valley. I don't know if I could even find Green Valley now, but it's down there
Wow.
somewhere. But the trees, the mesquite trees, and all of them were like at least 2 to 3 times. I mean, we're talking trees 75, 80 feet tall. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh my God,
They get a
where
bit
am
more
I?
water down there.
Yeah, they do. Well, back in those days, you could see cloud formation um, during the day in the summer.
Yep.
And then coming over the Madera Pass, you could see it, and then you could time it like 2:47,
Yep.
just thunder and lightning. And I don't think I've seen that in so long. You see
Yeah.
haboobs more,
Oh, I know.
right? But you don't
With the
see that,
dust, but you don't see, and you could, yeah, you're right. You could just time it. You would look
right?
at a tiny cloud out in the distance and you'd be like, okay, I've got 2 hours
Right.
because they build so quickly. But, Tucson is an incredibly diverse area and we just have a little bit hotter, drier conditions up here. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I root for our plants up here. I think they're pretty tenacious. And I especially love all the plants up on South Mountain. They're so
Oh God, I love. I
amazing.
mean, that's the best hike, isn't
It's
it?
the best hike in the
Yeah.
city, and the plants are doing pretty well up there too. At least when you start getting up with a bit
Yeah,
more
elevation
elevation.
makes a difference, right? So we were
Right.
in Kyrgyzstan, which I'd never even heard of before, but I went there in
Wow.
October, and I didn't, my ignorance, it's 93% mountain, the whole country, and it's got one mountain that's 21,000 feet. It's like this
And you went
gorgeous.
up it, right?
Well, no, I did not. I swam at the lake at the bottom.
Okay,
It
that's
was
pretty
freezing
good. That's
cold.
pretty good.
We
Yeah.
just stripped and jumped into because we had to,
What
right?
else would you do?
So anyway, we were. What was interesting is it's a nomadic lifestyle and we see it in the Amazon too. That as the elevation goes up, you're changing plant diversity. Sometimes it
Definitely.
changes every 20 feet. Same
Right.
thing with any animals or insects.
Yep.
But with global warming, it's changing. But if you got a mountain, you can cheat, right?
Yep.
So with them, they can take the cattle higher
Hmm.
in the summertime, and then they eventually have to come back in the winter. But
Right.
that's a good way of rotating whatever animals, whatever they have camel, they have goats and cashmere goats, and they have, but chickens
Cashmere
don't,
goats.
chicken, well, that's where your cashmere comes from,
Oh my
right? In
goodness.
Mongolia and
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
So that's but it is interesting to see, and if it's almost like when you were a kid. When I
Right.
was a kid, I guess some kids look at biology and they want to cut open a human. My daughter's a doctor, and so what fascinates people to do that, I have no idea. But
Yeah, I'm right
I
there
like
with
playing
you.
in
I'm a
the
plant person.
yeah, I like
Yeah.
playing in the dirt and in the near the riverbed or whatever,
Yeah.
and seeing that kind of thing. But you look at the earth as a landscaper. I look at the earth like I would a kid's backyard,
Hmm.
and you're shaping dirt, and you know that when you put water on, it's going to go
Oh, it's gonna
down,
move
and
and
there's different things, right? So
right.
that's kind of that. And if you look at the planet, if you look at it from outer space when we're looking down, it's the same concept. We got the oceans here, the water,
Right.
the lakes here and the
Well, and I think
rivers.
you bring up something that's really important is that we're seeing a shift and things are moving. And largely, especially with some of our desert plants, their their range is decreasing in size, and we're just not going to see plants where we used to in some places.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's
we've
kind of a
gotten,
hard reality to come to, but it's something that we need to prepare
yeah.
for.
Well, we have to acknowledge it first off, right?
Right.
And so what we have is a population here that has almost tripled since I got here. So I
Well,
graduated from University of New York.
and it's
And
projected to what, double in 25 years
so
or
what do we have to
something?
do to make that work?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one of the things is stop planting high water using crops and or landscapes, right?
Yep. Yep.
Try to preserve as much of the native environment as we can. That's a big part of it. And
Right.
then this concept of sprawl, we've sprawled quite a bit, but the idea of coming back to some of these cities, or not necessarily cities, I think back in the day they called them, I can't remember, little global villages they call it. Like so, you
Global
had
villages. I like
Avondale
that.
was
Yeah.
one, and
Yeah.
Phoenix is one, and Tempe is one. But they're little clusters of density
Right.
that are important for us to have because it preserves some of those outer areas that should be preserved.
Right.
So it's not. I don't want to sound like a complete environmental tree hugger because people shut the radio off with the phone.
It's
But
okay. I am.
yeah. But the thing is that you've got, when we're designing all this stuff, there's better ways to do it. And if you
Right.
think about that population growth, it's from people from other places.
Well,
They
I
want to
don't
be,
blame them.
they want to be familiar. So if I'm from
Yep.
Northern California, I want a ponderosa pine growing
Yep.
in
Yep.
the
They
desert
want
or
something that's
whatever.
home to them.
Right. But, it does take a while. Like you
Mhm.
said, you came here and you fell in love with the desert.
Oh
It
my
was the
God.
same
Yeah.
thing for me. I did not fall in love right away with the desert. I
Yeah.
fell in love with the fact that I could build working in the desert. But the deal is it was
Different journey for
hot.
everybody.
It was
Yeah.
hot and it was inhospitable. But then all over time, yes, I became
Yeah.
like a desert lover, but only because I started recognizing the different patterns
Hmm.
and understanding the beauty in each of the plants that are out there and what they do,
Right.
So it's really kind of it's a great study that you got. Okay,
Well, and that's only a little bit of it.
yeah, of course. So we're starting to get the hook, but tell me, you got the job now, you love it, you're doing a lot of cool things there.
Doing the work.
What do you see the future?
What do I
Because
see for the future? I hope to expand my work with Saguaros quite a bit and really
okay,
understand what their limits are and where we can do restoration best so that we can preserve them into the future. And I hope to do that with a lot of desert species as well,
right,
not just Saguaros.
Oregon pipes,
Oh my God,
driving that
Oregon
Oregon
pipes are
pipe thing, isn't
incredible.
that?
But then also really working with desert trees as well so that we can recommend the perfect tree to go in the perfect spot, much like you're
Uh,
doing,
yeah.
so that people
Or what
aren't
companion planting you're doing with it, right?
right, so that we see less Chinese elms and less eucalyptus
Yeah,
around the city, which aren't so good for the
right.
landscape and aren't so good for the biodiversity of the city.
It's
Um,
really a design concept. So if you want some of that stuff in, great, put some of that in. But the majority of the landscape should be, that's the way I look at it.
mm,
70, 80% should just be using native species and that sort of thing. But in the areas, if you need to have them in there in some of those nodal areas, you show the color, you show some of that. And otherwise you're gonna at some point now we're starting to see for the first time where developers are paying the price,
interesting.
and that's the
Okay.
difference. And we're seeing limitations on water for farming everywhere.
And do you think
So
they're listening, the landscapers now?
the landscapers, we never listen to anything. Um,
Okay, good to know.
right, that's
I'll
just
keep that in
there.
mind.
There's
Okay, that's very
no
good to know.
training a landscaper. We just are like, how can I build? How can I build more?
Okay.
And what's my way? If there's a competitive advantage, yes. So a landscaper will follow what's being done. We have landscape architects that are also not native. They're from other places. I
Yep.
don't know if
They're
they're from the
used to
planet or
doing
not,
something different.
and
Well,
they are looking to do whatever it may be. And then you have the owners, developers, maybe from out of state and that kind of thing. So it's this broad. you do have to have public policy that says, no,
Yep.
in this area, this is native and this is what you're going to do.
Right.
And otherwise, and this was kind of crazy when we did Terra Vita. I remember Del Webb at the time. They literally contacted me and say, you got a good relationship with the city. We'd like to see Sun City here. I was like, it's probably not the greatest idea. If you just do it this way. So I believe you can do native landscaping for less money.
Right.
I believe you can do remediation for less money.
Definitely.
Because it's, first of all, you dig native trees. You got this new budget for big native trees and cactus.
Right.
But the reality is you don't need as much other plant material, and you have full maturity immediately. So you can, there's a way to design that. You don't need all these granites all the time. Sometimes the granite acts as a mulch layer, but realistically it's just absorbing heat and it's not doing us that good. So there's a lot of different, you don't take me down that alley.
I think we need to be talking more. It sounds like you've got a lot of really fun things going on.
Not always right, but yeah. But anyway, so it's now I'm due a trip to Desert Botanical Garden.
Yeah, there you go.
And you can walk me around, and I haven't been there in a while. But that's the whole thing, is that rediscovering the cool things we have in Phoenix and understanding that there's still people out there. ASU is, #1 innovation school now in the country, in the world, I think, right?
Yeah.
Who ever expected that? That was we used to be a party school, So, but now we got a lot of stuff. We got a lot of industry coming, and we got a lot of people who are caring about where they live and the desert. And I think it's, I'm optimistic, put it that way.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that you're optimistic, because I am as well. I love how much people care about our plants, and the enthusiasm from the public has just been overwhelming and incredible.
Yeah.
And our volunteer base is thriving, and then just help around the city as well.
Yeah, I know that garden, and we talked about Boyce Thompson.
Yes.
With Drew, the last podcast we had, and another phenomenal. I haven't been there. I know one of my competitors did a restoration over there, and I failed. It was a friend too. He was teaching with me over at Mesa Community, and I'd do a trip over there to Boyce Thompson. So there's so many cool things to see and do. We're getting the hook.
Are we?
Allie, we could keep going on and on.
I think we could. Yeah, maybe we should.
You're coming to the VIP.
Yeah.
You're coming to the VIP dinner, and
Yeah.
we'll chat and talk there. And you're going to see some of the things we got coming on. That's in a week.
Okay.
So come on to that. So thanks for all of you for joining and watching what we were talking about today. Hopefully this resonated with you. And if it didn't, then turn on another podcast. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us. Please subscribe if you like what we're doing, if you want to see more of it. And thanks again. Thanks. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.